Tonight, John Muse, Simon & Schuster's award-winning sales representative, will be sharing with us his recommendations on this year's best new books. And later in the evening, as I said, we will be joined by a very special surprise guest. John was first hired by Macmillan Scribner Publishing Group in '85 and retained after the company was purchased by Simon & Schuster in late '93. Simon & Schuster publishes first-class information and entertainment in all printed, digital, and audio formats. John has won Simon & Schuster Sales Awards, has been on the New England Independent Booksellers Association Board of Directors, as well as an advisory council member. He's won the Sales Rep of the Year Award from the NEIBA and has held multiple positions in the Regional Rep Association Book Publishers Reps of New England. So, without further ado, please give a warm digital screen time welcome to the wonderful John Muse. Take it away, John.
You know, you say without further ado, but it was an awful lot of ado going on there, if you ask me. You know, people at RJ asked me to write a little, you know, sort of bio. It's like, oh, okay, I'll put it out there, but I didn't think she would read the whole darn thing. But be that as it may, you know, yes, here I am, and thank you very much. I want to thank RJ Julia for having me here in the first place. You guys may not know, but this is the inaugural events for RJ. They want to do this on a semi-regular basis where they have, you know, sales reps present to you their favorites from the list. And so there are some places that do multiple reps and others just sort of do something different, but I'm really pleased to be chosen to be the first one to sort of do this. And so you and I, all of us collectively, will be the guinea pigs for RJ as they move forward, trying to make this this whole thing sort of work at a really great, you know, great high level. But we'll start things off, and we'll start, you know, talking about things, and I'll talk about mainly it's going to be about books that are out there right now, or, you know, really soon on sale, because I don't want to go too far into the future. I'd rather sort of keep things that are immediate, you can actually get, you can enjoy now, and that's kind of important as far as I'm concerned. Keep it all fresh in your minds. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, my schedule is going to be mainly fiction to start things off. And then I'm going to do a nonfiction title that's brand new. I'm going to do a couple of books that are coming up in about a month for which you can, you know, place pre-orders and, you know, get them when they come on sale in early in March. Then I'll present 3 different children's titles to you as well. And then as Dana mentioned, there's a little bit of a surprise thing at the end, which is always kind of nice. So as Dana said, I'm willing to take questions along the way. I'm happy to sort of stop and answer questions. I'll see if I can remember to pause in between titles, because I have a tendency to talk pretty fast. If you talk to my wife or ask her, she might, like, you know, sort of tell me to slow down. So I'm going to try to sort of work my way through this in a more reasonable fashion. So it's interesting because when I do this kind of thing, when I have done this kind of thing in the past, usually it's in person, and usually it's in front of a group of some people, you know, at a store. And I like to sort of walk and pace, and I tend to have a lot of sort of physical movements going on there. So if I get up and move around, you'll sort of like know why, because it's like my tendency to want to be physical in my presentation. But I don't know how those guys on TV do it. I just don't, because they don't move at all, and it's amazing. So that's my quick intro, and I'm going to talk about the very first title coming up, and that's going to be The Paris Wife. The Paris Wife is by Janet Skesley and Charles. Oh, by the way, I haven't got this all memorized, and so I'm going to refer to my notes, you know, fairly frequently, I guess, to sort of see what I have here that I want to sort of tell you about. So please forgive me for looking down at a piece of paper, and you might hear some rustling at the same time. So yeah, the Paris Library. The Paris Library is on sale next Tuesday. First of all, it's on sale next Tuesday. It's not quite out there yet, but it's a very highly acclaimed new novel coming out. It's been chosen by the Indie Next people, by the booksellers of New England, as the #1 Indie Next pick for the entire country. As you might imagine, it is about librarians in Paris on the brink of World War II. The author, Janet Skesling Charles, she actually has a video posted on her Facebook page where she talks about how she came upon this story because she actually worked at the American Library in Paris back about, I don't know, I guess I imagine 10, 15, 20 years ago or so. And when she was working there, she heard the story of, what happened during the early part of World War II and during World War II for these librarians, because they were incredibly brave in terms of sort of first of all, getting books out to customers, because they were sort of forbidden from doing that because the Nazis occupied Paris and they wouldn't allow it, especially Jewish literature. So they took it upon themselves to do it anyway. Had all kinds of secret things going on to sort of make it all keep it secret and not get caught. But the novel is filled with love and betrayal, people trying to sort of do what's right, but also sort of feeling like they need to do something else instead. And just, it comes down to, all kinds of choices that people make in real times of stress like World War II. So there are a lot of bonds that are broken and a lot of those that are reinforced. It's really beautifully done as far as I'm concerned. You can liken this to books like Lilac Girls and The Paris Wife for fans of those titles. And the novel takes two different threads. It takes a thread of that time period, but also goes to 1983 in Montana. And if you read the book, you'll sort of find out the reason for those two storylines, but they come together in the end in a very very nice fashion. I think you'll like this one a lot. So that's the Paris Library coming from us in about 5-6 days. Any questions for that one?
Yes, we do have a question from Debbie Prince. Debbie, we're going to unmute you so that you can ask your question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was just asking a general question about whether this would be recorded for viewing later or if you had to take notes.
Oh, that's all right. It is going to be recorded, and we will be able to probably be putting that up on our YouTube channel, RJ Julia's YouTube channel.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to the next, unless there's another question there somewhere.
Let's see. Nope, I think that is it for the Paris Library.
Oh, another thing I wanted to say before I started was that in choosing these titles, I tried to be very different in the ones that I'm picking. I don't want to sort of stay with one kind of novel. So you'll see a bit of a mixture of things here that are, sometimes, radically different among themselves. So the next title, Dana, if you please, is called Milk Fed. Milk Fed is a book that just published, in fact, 2 days ago on Tuesday. And it's very, modern, contemporary times. It's today. It's a 24-year-old woman named Rachel, who's had a long time sort of conflict, or not a conflict, but her mother has always sort of put, laid it on her to cut calories and don't watch what you eat and don't do this and don't do that. And so she's living her life as a 24-year-old professional woman, constantly on the watch for calories and having the barest of salads and this and that. She's thin as a rail and she works out 3 hours a day. And it's wearing her down. And she goes to her favorite yogurt shop, and there's a new person working there named Miriam. And Miriam is slightly overweight and an Orthodox Jewish woman. And she has no problem at all trying to give the ultimate yogurt to her new customer, and who's going to become her good friend, Rachel. And Rachel at first tries to sort of not eat the ice cream, not eat the frozen yogurt, but ends up starting to eat it. So this is a book about appetites. It's a book about physical appetites for food. It's appetites for sexuality. It's appetites for spirituality and faith, because that's explored quite a bit in the course of this book. When Rachel sort of goes to Miriam's house and Miriam's family and wants to be part of that sort of traditional sort of thing. And what I found the most interesting about this book was just the way that she described having real food for the first time. She just like your mouth was watering having her describe to you eating this yogurt, which she hasn't tasted for like 5 years. And when she goes on to eat more and more food, each of the experiences were recounted that way. So I found it to be extraordinary novel. It was also rather sexy as far as I'm concerned. And there's some reviews along the way that have covered that. But when I was reading this, I didn't think of it as being sort of, salacious in any way. I thought the sexuality was frank, but it was also enough of an intimate portrayal that it felt sort of a pleasure to read, and not at all in the way of sort of lascivious at all. So Milk Fed is also an Indie Next selection. The Oprah magazine said a sensuous, delightfully delirious tale. Broder's latest is a devour it in one sitting wonder. And Time magazine said a thrilling examination of hunger, desire, faith, family, and love. A lot of other reviews came through exactly like those right there. So I hope you get a chance to read it and enjoy it. It's Milk Fed by Melissa Broder.
This is one of my top to be read books for 2021, John.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, sounds it. All right. Doesn't look like we have any questions coming in from our guests, so we will move on ahead to your next title. All
right. Again, a very different kind of novel. It's also contemporary, Faye Far Away by Helen Fisher. This is a debut. And when I read this book, back, a long time ago, because I read these things way before they actually come on sale, as you might imagine. I just fell in love with it. It was just so easy to talk about with my buyers as I was, going through the season, because it's such a lovely story about a woman. She's like 37 years old, and she's married and has a husband and has a daughter, and I think she has two actually, but she lost her mother when she was like 7 years old. She has never really known her mother, and she feels that tremendously, that loss of what the mother she didn't have when she was growing up. And there's a lot of heartache involved with that. And there's this toy box that she had when she was a little girl that she sort of always kept around. And for whatever reason, she went up to the attic at one point and happened to sort of step into the box in order to get something else, to reach for something else. And when she steps into this box, she magically goes through the bottom and goes to 1979 to her mother, who's still alive. And she, Faye, is there living with her mother as a 6 or 7 year old. Only Faye is her adult self. And she finds a way to sort of get to talk to and get to meet her mother and get to know her throughout the course of 2 different trips going back in time. It's a dangerous trip. You can't just do it, lightly, but she's so enthralled with getting to know her mother. So she ends up being torn about this notion of, do I stay or do I go back? I've got a family, but I've missed my mother so much. And there's just so much lovely poignancy and longing in this novel. And it, as you might imagine, it resolves itself in a very satisfying way. And I think that if you give it a chance, you'll like it a lot. We have a great quote from Diana Gabaldon, the queen of time travel books, and she said, a lovely, deeply moving story of love and loss and memory made real. It's been regarded as unique and unforgettable. It's been called by a lot of reviewers as the best books of the winter, and also genuine and touching. So I liked a lot about this. I liked the marriage aspects, the intrigue, the marriage, mother-daughter bond, a lot of positive aspects to this novel. Faye Far Away by Helen Fisher.
I have goosebumps. And then you also have the fantasy with it too, going into another realm, if you will. So you get kind of a little bit of everything here.
Yeah, the whole time traveler's wife kind of thing. Like I said, the Outlander series, certainly is. And it does have that kind of romanticism as well, which is just a terrific aspect. Yeah. I liked it so much.
Yeah. All right, fantastic. We'll keep moving along here then.
Yep. So that was the 3 hardcovers. I'm going to talk about 2 different trade paperbacks that are now, just recently published. The Only Good Indians came out on January 26th. This is a book that R.J. Julius sold rather well in hardcover, but again, a wholly different kind of novel here. So again, it's in paperback now. It got just tremendous reviews everywhere. I haven't had a chance to meet the author when it got published, because he did a real live author tour, sort of pre-COVID, obviously. But we had a great quote from Tommy Orange. He's the sort of successful author of There, and Tommy Orange said, "More than I could have asked for in a novel." Publishers Weekly called it again one of the best books of the year. They called it heartbreakingly beautiful, as did the Library Journal. And let's see, heartbreakingly beautiful story of revenge, cultural identity, and the cost of breaking from tradition. It's a horror novel. It's a horror story. This is your the premise is that the story is that 4 Native American men go out hunting, and they end up crossing into a place where they shouldn't be hunting, and they kill a deer. It ends up being what's the word for a mother deer? I guess a deer or a doe or something.
Yeah.
The deer gives birth, and they take the deer back and they go about their lives. But what they didn't realize was they messed with the mythology, with the mysticism involved in not killing animals they shouldn't have killed. And so 10 years down the road, it comes back to haunt them in a very dangerous way. And they end up sort of each of them sort of fighting for their lives. It's just like you're sort of like gritting you're gripping your armchair all the way through it. And I liked a lot the various aspects of Native American culture that the author, who is himself Native American, brings into the story. It's a powerful depiction of a culture as well as mythology, and a rip-rousing kind of horror story too. So yeah, it's just it's one of those ones that may not be the right thing for lots of people, but it got a lot of starred reviews, and I liked it a lot. The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones.
And people that I've spoken to that have read this title have said that it's just a page turner. I mean, if it's your flavor, you can't put it down.
Yeah, there are so many scenes in here that just sort of are come so to life as you're reading it. Because these characters they get haunted by this deer, basically, sort of one at a time, and it comes in piecemeal kind of fashion. So they see a little flash of something, they don't know what it is, but it gives them the willies, and it gives you the willies because you're reading it that way, and it's like, oh, until the big confrontation in the end. So it was pretty outstanding.
All right, great. We'll keep moving along then. Let's see.
If nobody has any questions, absolutely.
No questions yet. Don't be shy, guys. Send on your questions over.
Yeah, again, I don't want to go too fast, because I can be, and I don't want to rush through this.
We did get a question.
Yay!
Has Stephen Graham Jones written any other books?
He's got a new one coming out this summertime, and he did have some previous ones as well. And I couldn't tell you what the names of them were off the top of my head, but he has done one or two before. Yes, he just didn't get the acclaim that he has gotten for this one right here, which is really gratifying for us to have gotten him when he got to basically to his best book. It's sort of worked out pretty well for us. That's kind of true for Melissa Broder too. She got a lot of great reviews for the earlier book, before Milk Fed, but this one here looks like a real breakthrough for her in a lot of ways. So it's nice when an author sort of comes to their real peak, and you get a chance to sell them, and you guys get a chance to buy them and read them.
Absolutely. Melissa's previous book, what was that? The Pisces?
The Pisces, yeah. I did not read, but people said it had a very similar sensibility without being the same, but similar.
Yes. All right. We will keep.
By the way, along the way, if you guys have any questions about my being a rep and what I do, because you guys know booksellers quite well, and staff at RJ Julia very well, and you probably read about publishing. But if you don't know what the middleman does, you feel free to sort of engage me in conversation about my job, because it really is pretty great, and I've been doing it for a long time, and I've been doing it for a long time for a reason, because it's an outstanding way to live your life. So anyway, yeah, that's The Only Good Indians.
Okay.
We published Paul Yoon for the first time when we did a book called Snow Hunters back in, 2013 or 2014. We published his first book, and from the get-go, I was on this guy's, he was on my radar. I just thought I think this guy is just one of the best writers out there. I know, and maybe he's also married to someone famous, and he lives in Boston, the Cambridge area. I know he's married to someone as well who's an equally well-known writer. But yeah, Paul Yoon's one of those sort of people who might be under the radar for some readers, but if he has been, then he needs to be put up there like immediately, because I think he's a fantastic prose stylist. He chooses some really interesting storylines. The Snow Hunters was about an immigrant, leaving Korea and coming to, in that case, going to South America to sort of change his life. He did one called The Mountain, which is a collection of stories, which I didn't get to read all the stories, but I like the ones that I did read. And then last year in hardcover, he did Run Me to Earth, which in this case is about in the late 60s Laos, where three orphans are sort of trying to make their way and basically stay alive during that time period in Laos, because there was, so much violence going on there, at the time. But although he writes about, what's going on, these three kids who are basically, young teenagers trying to survive the minefields and everything else going on, they do find a way, as kids in that environment, tend to do. They tend to find a way to survive. And these three, bond as friends, and they start sort of doing some things for basically what it ends up being a field doctor who's out there on his own trying to save, people and get them back to sort of, so they end up helping him. And at a certain point, he helps them get out of there and sort of help them escape to, to different parts of the world. So the three of them go off in different directions. And the story follows them as they go in these different directions, because they all had a pact to get back together again some way, somehow. So, man, the writing in this book I just thought was just gorgeous. He's always grabbed me that way in terms of the way he writes sentences. There's danger, but there's still beauty in the world. That's sort of the message he puts out there. It's filled with, as I wrote down here, wisdom and beauty and cruelty and pathos. There's a book that came out by a guy named Hernan Diaz called In the Distance, if any of you ever got a chance to read that. And when I looked at that book as a comp title, it looks a lot like that kind of storyline. It's not the same kind of culture, but the same kind of story where those two were trying to get back to each other. So Run Me to Earth is just a real, sort of quiet book of power that I think has served a lot of people well for book club purposes, especially. So yeah, Run Me to Earth is a real favorite, and Paul Yoon is a real favorite writer.
And Paul Yoon's wife, Laura Vandenberg.
Didn't I get that right? I thought she was married. I thought he was married to somebody who's actually a writer. I mean, somebody who's published, and maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, she wrote, well, this is Google telling me.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Not that it matters. Not that it matters. I just, I thought I heard it. It's funny because I was actually at an event in Brookline, Mass for a different reason, and I was listening to the author do their talk to the group, and in the Brookline, they're down actually in a basement room, and the person who was speaking, doing the introduction for the author for the event that night, said, "Oh, I see. We also have Paul Yoon in the room," and I almost went over and hugged him. It was one of those things where I had just read Snow Hunters, and it's like, "Oh my God!" And it sounds, just like you get this starstruck thing when you sort of chance to actually see physically a real person who created such a work of art. So yeah, it was kind of a cool experience. Run Me to Earth, Paul Yoon.
Our chief operating officer, I think it was Lori. She had written a comment on this title, and she wrote, "One of my favorite authors, Paul Yoon, has the ability to combine both the devastating and the beautiful throughout his storylines and characters. Every word is felt and absorbed on the pages of his books."
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we do have a couple of questions coming in. John, actually, there's a question throwing us back to the Paris Library asking,
sure,
does it go back and forth between chapters?
Pretty much, yeah. They do 1983 Montana with a character named Lily. Lily is a 15-year-old girl who lives next door to a woman who has been very reclusive all her years, growing up. And she learns that she had been in France once, and this character, Lily, wanted to sort of write a French paper for her high school teacher. So she goes over and knocks on her door, and she gets to meet this woman who ends up being, of course, a character who had left the Paris Library after World War II. So it does go back and forth between those two time periods, yes.
All right. And Patty has her hand up. Patty, would you like to ask a question to John?
Maybe.
Yeah, I wondered if Run Me to Earth was ultimately an optimistic or positive book, or whether it's mostly negative.
No, I felt positive. I think, in terms of the story, certainly there's a lot of hardship that they're going through, but I would not consider it to be hard, a breaking, that would break you. I think as far as the characters working to support each other, to help each other, and get out of that kind of world and survive, I think it was very much a message of hope that people, of course, can as well. And of course, in the end, they do get out and they do make it through. So I didn't feel that it was going to be, that was depressing in that way. No.
Thank you,
But
Patty.
thank you for asking.
We have another question, John, regarding your workday.
Sure.
What does a typical workday look like for you? I'm picturing lots of reading and travel in non-pandemic times. Is that the reality?
Yeah, it's very much a pre-COVID and current. It's like there's just two wholly different worlds, because pre-COVID, my life was go off to see independent booksellers at least 3 times a week, and those booksellers were often at least a 2-hour drive, because I live in Springfield, Mass. And I didn't want to be in the Boston area. I was happy. My wife and I were happy to raise our 3 sons, here in the Pioneer Valley. So if I have to go to a bookstore in Brookline or Cambridge or RJ Julia, I get in my car and go. But I like my car. I love my car. I like to drive. And of course, the advent of podcasts and books on tape and the books on disc and now books on file, became a great way to spend time in the car. But yeah, you read a lot because you have to, mainly you prepare for sales conference. I do the most reading, and most reps do when you're preparing for sales conference, because most publishers would like, some kind of feedback on what we think about books, just in terms of how we can market it and that kind of thing. So, but my problem is you might be for you guys too. I can't read at night. I fall asleep dead away after 8 o'clock or 8:30. It's like, forget, I can't, my mind goes to mush. So, I have a hard time reading at night, so I try to get my reading done in the morning and during the daytime. But yeah, you read a lot of pieces of books as opposed to an entire book, because because I'm literally selling 3,000 to 4,000 titles in a season, so I can't do them all. So you sort of you taste an awful lot of things, like a wine tasting, sort of taste a lot of them, and then when you find one you like, you go back to that one later on. But you have to get to know a lot of things. A little bit about a lot of things, and so that's sort of how life went. So, and now that I'm home, now that I can't travel, it's easier to read, actually, because there's a lot. I'm not spending the hours in the car. But thank you for asking that. Yeah.
All right, wonderful. We can move along to the next title then.
On to hardcover nonfiction. Larry Loftus, I thought, did a great job here with The Princess Spy. This is it's one of those kind of things like, you can't believe this person actually was real. Her name is Aileen Griffith, and she was a spy for the OSS, stationed mainly in Spain during the middle part of and the latter part of World War II. Aileen was had been born in Pearl, I think it was called Pearl River, New York, like in the Hudson Valley, just north of New York, and she longed to sort of be part of the war effort, to do something at all, but she couldn't just join the army. So she was a gorgeous woman, so she went down to New York, and she ended up becoming a model. And she was trained by a modeling agency to do her job. And in that capacity, she got to go to a lot of parties, and she met this guy who was actually one of the forerunners, one of the founders of the OSS at a social party. So she talked to him and said, I'd like to do something. He said, oh, you could be a nurse. It's like, of course. He said, you want to be a nurse? He said, no, I don't want to be a nurse. I want to do something real, so to speak, because she didn't have any nursing training. I don't mean to put down nurses, but she didn't have any nursing training. So he accepted her offer. He had her trained, took her to quote unquote OSS school. She knew how to speak Spanish anyway, as well as French, and he sent her to Spain. And she had a career there for 15 months of literally being part of the war effort. You know, she was part of the Nightingale Express, which sort of helped get some of the Allied soldiers, you know, through Spain to the coast of Portugal. She got secret documents out of there. It was one of those extraordinary stories. Elaine Griffith herself did write some books about her experiences, but there were some people who questioned whether or not she was actually embellishing her career. And Larry Loftus did an awful lot of work with newly declassified material to find out that, yes, in fact, she really did do all these things that she was talking about, and he has documents to prove it. So an outstanding, you know, nonfiction story here about a real life, you know, Casablanca, Notorious, those classic old movies like that of all the spy work going on in Europe. She lived that life, and she was, you know, using her beauty and her elegance to great effect in getting that information from the Nazis and from the Spanish, who were Nazi sympathizers. Just a pretty rousing read as far as I was concerned. I liked it a lot.
Yeah. I wonder how long it took him to write this book, gathering all of that information, research.
Yeah, my impression was, like in this kind of case, it's usually a number of years. I don't recall what he did before. Actually, he did Codename Lease, which we did a number of years back, like I think in 2016 or 2017. So he spent like 4 years writing this at least, and probably more than that. Yeah, Princess Spy, yeah, it's pretty cool thing. If you liked books like Code Girls, A Woman of No Importance, things like that, I have my notes here. I think you'll definitely like a book like this.
Fantastic.
I think it's the kind of thing that R.J. Julia really sells quite well.
I agree. All right, we'll move ahead to the next title here.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about two different titles that are coming out in the month. I mentioned those two at the top of when I began. These two are coming out in a month. This one happens to be coming out on March the 2nd, Infinite Country by Patricia Engel. Man, you know, it's just such a pleasure to when you get manuscripts and you get you know, bound manuscripts, and you get, you know, early galleys, and then the finished, and you get an ARC of books, and you get a chance to read something even before a sales conference, and you come across a writer like Patricia Engel, you sort of like, you say to yourself, wow, I'm just so, it's such a pleasure to be, and such a privilege to be part of something like this. And so this one came through. Every rep in our sales force sort of just fell in love with this book right here. Yes, it is coming out, you know, basically on the heels of all these, you know, sort of immigrant stories, these books like American Dirt and the ones that come out after that about, you know, this topic, and, you know, some controversy attached to some of those. But I can say with confidence, Patricia Engel herself is the daughter of Colombian immigrants, and so she really knows, you know, whereof she speaks. This fictionalized, this novel is about a Colombian family that are torn apart by the immigration authorities. They're trying to escape Colombia. They want to see the United States. They want to experience it. They want to come in for a little while. It turns out that while they're there, they have a daughter and a son. But the husband creates some kind of made up sort of charge, and so he gets deported. And he has to take one of his children back with him to Colombia because the mother couldn't stay and afford to take care of all of them. So he leaves with one daughter, and she stays with two other children, and they end up being separated for 15 years. And it's a story of their trying, first of all, to survive. The mother in America working these really menial jobs, trying to support her children and sort of get by and not be able to speak the language that well. And her husband back in Colombia, sort of, you know, trying to find a way to get back to his wife or to bring her back home, but they're thwarted, you know, over and over again. It was phenomenal. The Lauren Groff quote in the cover there is, "Knock me out with its elegant and lucid deconstruction of yearning, family, belonging, and sacrifice." The jacket image, in case you are curious, is a condor and a puma and a snake. And those are three creatures that are actually prominent in cultures associated with the Andes, in Colombian culture, Peruvian cultures. These are three animals that present a strong mythology in those cultures, and that's where the jacket comes from. They are brought into the book, you know, during the course of the storytelling by Patricia Engel. And It's a book that's going to be going on sale 3/2. You cannot buy it before then. You might be aware of a situation where publishers sort of call a book a laydown title, and that means that nationwide we put it on sale on this day and not before because we think certain books we feel have that kind of importance. And so we decided to have this book, take that kind of importance and make it that. So this is a #1 Indie Next pick for booksellers across the country, and just was a powerful rendering of an immigrant story for today. I hope you get a chance to pick it up and enjoy it on March 2nd.
And we do have a question. Is Infinite Country based on true events?
It wasn't my impression that Pusha Engel's family directly experienced this, but it's certainly part of families that she knows who went through this. And so to that degree, it's personal, but not biographical.
Okay. There's so
You
many
certainly get the sense that she knows. I mean, when you're reading the book, you definitely get to know, you get the understanding that she lived this experience, one way or the other. So it was pretty powerful.
Wow. All right.
Infinite Country. What do I have next? Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
There's so many good
Codebreaker.
ones coming in so quickly. It's just the start of the year.
Yeah, that's just me, right? Because you don't even have, Harper and Penguin Random House and all the other guys who are doing, great books too. But
It's a great time for
the other
reading.
big one, I know, who's got time? And it's the other thing is, oh, look, somebody's got a nice little red splash there.
How did that happen?
So again, I know, what is that, right? Oh, the pencil, it's funny. You drew that.
All right.
You can make all kinds of things now. You can make oh yeah, you got a new toy. Use that next time.
I will.
So Walter Isaacson, I've got to believe that a lot of you guys are very aware of Walter Isaacson's track record. This book is on sale March the 9th. So again, you've got to wait about a month or so. You know Walter Isaacson from his series of what we refer to as his genius biographies. He did, Benjamin Franklin, then he did Albert Einstein, and then he did Steve Jobs, and then he did Leonardo da Vinci, and he also did, after da Vinci, he did The Innovators, which was a book about, various innovators in, Silicon Valley kind of thing. So he's basically doing another genius book here. That's how we sort of talked about it in our sales conference and in publishing, in our publishing houses. It's another genius book where he's looking at Jennifer Doudna, and that's how you pronounce it. It's like D-O-W-D, and then I'm sorry, Doudna, D-O-W-D, and then like N-U-H kind of thing. That's how you pronounce her last name. But Jennifer Doudna, recently, you might have heard, won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. She and I think another person sort of co-won it, but they won it because of their work in CRISPR technology. So for those who don't know all about CRISPR technology, I thought I would just sort of tell you because, right? You might have heard about it though, right? So CRISPR technology is clustered, regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. And basically it's about gene editing. Basically it's a technology that we can use to edit genes on your DNA. And obviously the intention here is that it's going to be used for, for good, for affecting negative things, diseases and that kind of thing, affecting food, medicine, food, lots of different applications for CRISPR technology going down. They've not been done yet. They're still, working on it. But there's a major, 500-page book that Walter Isaacson does so well about a woman today, a genius today, who's working on technology to help all of us improve our lives. Isaacson wrote, her work illustrates, as Leonardo da Vinci's did, that the key to innovation is connecting a curiosity about basic science to the practical work of devising tools that can be applied to our lives. And that's exactly what Jennifer Doudna has done in her work. And it's something that that Isaacson puts across very well in this book. Great read. He's an engrossing writer. If you've read him before, and some of you probably have, you know that his work is always high regarded. It's always well respected. And I expect to get plenty of review attention in about a month or so, if not sooner. That is Walter Isaacson's The Code Breaker.
I'm excited about that. That's incredible.
Yeah, it looks pretty awesome. And, he runs through the history of the science before CRISPR. So he'll do like the double helix and James Watson. He'll go, Charles Darwin, and he does, all that in the first, few chapters before getting to that part right there.
It's a great buildup.
Yeah, you get to know exactly what you're talking about by the time you get to Jennifer Doudna. Actually, it starts out great because when I was reading this, it starts out like in a room where COVID-19 has just begun. It's just come out. A year ago, in this month or last month was revealed, and because CRISPR technology can be used in situations like this, there's like a war room going on there where Doudna is leading a Zoom meeting with people to try to to see what they can do on the CRISPR side to fight the COVID-19, if not like a medication, then at least a way to keep that kind of thing from happening, in future generations. And so there's a real, you are there in the room kind of thrill to what they're talking about early in the book, and then he goes into the history and everything else. He's just great. Walter Isaacson is one of the best.
All right.
So I wanted to talk to you guys before I get into the children's books about one what I would call backlist title, an author who is very under the radar. If you think Paul Yoon's under the radar, Emma Hooper is as well. But like Paul Yoon, and perhaps even more so, when I read Emma Hooper's first book, Etta and Otto and Russell and James. This guy came out to want to say about 4 years ago or so. And again, when I read this book and I thought to myself, holy mackerel, this is like genius at work. I couldn't believe how moving that book was. When I did these Reptic sessions in bookstores, 2 years ago, I was talking about that book and how perfect it is for book clubs. And it's because Emma Hooper just gosh, she's so lyrical in her presentation. So that was a story about older characters in their 80s, but also a love story that went back, 60 years, and love lost and love yearned for and unrequited, and then couldn't get it, and also a bit of magical realism, thrown in with a very light touch. And this new one right here is, although not as small a book as that one is not small, but it felt like a small book. This has a bigger canvas to work on. It's set off the coast of Newfoundland in this very small community, and in this community, the fish are starting to go away. They're starting to disappear, and no one knows why. So they start to lose their livelihood. The people in the town start to lose their livelihood, and they have to leave, they go away, and the town is dwindling in number of people. But one family, wants to hold out, the Connor family, mother and the father, and then the son, Finn, and the daughter, Cora. And they want to hang out, last as long as they can, waiting for the fish to come back. And so the mother and father split up, and they go off to work somewhere else to split the shift and go off and work part-time somewhere else to pay the bills. But the little boy, Finn, takes it upon himself to try to solve the problem. And music is a big part of this, as it was for the last book too. And the way Emma Hooper uses music and mythology and magical realism to help Finn, find a way to overcome this problem was just gorgeously written and just beautiful. I'm still, having goosebumps about it. It came out a year ago in paperback, and you can go back to it and enjoy it for the first time, I'm sure, if you get a chance to. So, but I thought I would do it. This one right here is actually read for you. Can I get out of yeah, let me do this. Hang on a second. I'm going to go to exit full screen. I want to read to you just a little bit from this book right here. Do I have time for this, Dana? How am I doing on time?
So we actually have a special surprise guest that has arrived in our waiting room. And if you want to do the reading.
Oh, it's 7:50 already?
It is. I know the time
Oh, holy mackerel. Forget about that then.
goes right by.
Yeah, suffice it to say, it's a beautiful book, and I'm sorry to keep you guys.
No, I'm sitting here watching, and I don't want it to end.
All right. So anyway, I don't want to tire the folks with this. So anyway, that's Homesick Songs. I'm going to run through the children's books, pretty quickly here, so we can get to our guest author.
Okay.
So let's go on to Jump the Sun.
Okay.
Just a great picture book biography of Zora Neale Hurston. It's one of those things where it's an appropriate time. She had her birthday on January 7th. She actually passed away on January 28th. But of course, we're in the middle of Black History Month, and you can't find a better way to celebrate it than to celebrate the life of one of the great African-American writers, of past generations. Zora Neale Hurston, a picture book with absolutely lovely illustrations. Next is a different, age level, but Pet. Man, Matthew Van Fleet has done some great books over the years with Cat and Dog and Color Dog and Tails and Heads, and he's always had this fantastic format here with the pull the tabs and lift the flaps. They're a delight. They're interactive. There's a lot of touch and feel aspect, and the very young crowd very much can appreciate a book like this with all the color and the moving parts. That's Matthew Van Fleet's Pet. And then thirdly, The 13 Witches. This is a great middle grade read. 8 to 12-year-olds will appreciate this especially. That's the target market. What I like about this book right here is, first of all, it's the start of a trilogy. And second of all, I've always been enamored. When I do read children's books, it's usually at this age group. And when I read them, I really like a story about young people, having to fight against evil. And it's a storyline that sort of keeps arising, over and over again in great literature, from back to Hansel and Gretel against the Witch, or Chronicles of Narnia, or Wrinkle in Time, or even Harry Potter. They always have to sort of fight the great fight against great evil. And that's what happens in this book right here. The character has to fight the memory thief witch who has taken over her mother and is going to take over their family. It's an epic story, and there's more to come.
All right. I believe our next book jacket comes from someone very special.
Yes.
Should we do a drum roll?
Drum roll, please. So when I was preparing these titles for talk to you guys about them, I was going to do 2 nonfiction books, and one of them was Aftershocks by NADIA OWUSU. And I saw NADIA do an hour-long event on NPR. On a blog broadcast, and took the shot at asking her editor if she felt like NADIA wouldn't mind joining us tonight to talk about her book, and lo and behold, she agreed. So it was just great to hear. But I was just hugely impressed with the book when I read it, and when NADIA agreed, Ms. OWUSU agreed to sort of join us tonight, I couldn't have been more pleased. And so I'm going to do like a couple of minutes introduction about the book, and then I think we're going to bring in NADIA to sort of talk to us a little bit. I'll ask her a question or two, but you can ask questions as well. So let me read what I've written as far as an intro for Aftershocks. This is a book that I thought that defied categorization sometimes. It does say it's a memoir, but it's also it's about racial justice. It's about literary essays. It's about a mother-daughter relationship. It's about faith. It's got an awful lot of categories that could be assigned to this book. The title refers to the very many aftershocks that Ms. OWUSU experienced in her life, the results of seismic happenings in her life, literal, metaphoric, as well as spiritual. NADIA OWUSU grew up the daughter of a UN diplomat, so she lived in many different countries and many different cultures. Her mother left her when she was very young, 2 or 3 years old, and her father remarried. Her father, you'll learn when reading this book, was an amazing man who imbued his daughter with wisdom and her sense of family and her sense of culture. However, before she turned 14 years old, NADIA OWUSU's father died. You know how in an earthquake, people have said that the safest place to go is into a door frame? That's your sort of best place. You could say that Nadia's father was basically her doorway. He was both her doorway to learning and to love, but also her strength and her protection. The death of her father can be thought of as a crack in that doorway, a fissure, if you will, that wouldn't heal. Then at age 28, Ms. OWUSU's stepmother, in a confrontation they were having, revealed to Nadia that her father had actually died of AIDS. And this revelation led to that metaphoric door frame. It led it to collapse. In the aftermath, the aftershock for Ms. OWUSU, she takes us through her thought process in looking at her life, what her father taught her, how much faith has a role in our lives, how being a person of color and perpetually an immigrant affects everything about our lives, from the way we speak, to how we present ourselves physically, and how we are accepted or not by society. In doing this, one step Nadia OWUSU took was to actually sit down. She had bought in the past a secondhand blue chair, and she decided to use that chair to literally sit in it, to think all this through. And so, Dan, you can bring in Nadia now, if you wouldn't mind. Nadia OWUSU now, if you wouldn't mind. Nadia, I hope you don't mind. Where are you?
I'm here.
There she is.
Welcome.
Hello again.
Thank you so much. Hello.
Hello, hello. So it's great to see you again. Now I've seen you for the third time since it was the WBUR thing, and then we spoke last week by Zoom. So thank you very much for writing the book and for being here and for listening to my overly long intro. But when you and I spoke last week, I knew we'd have just a little bit of time to do this, and so I thought, again, I would sort of focus on two things, and the first one would be that physical blue chair you decided to sort of sit in and think things through. So can you speak to us a little bit perhaps about the blue chair?
Sure. So after this, first of all, thank you all for having me. Thanks, John, for inviting me. So the blue chair, it was a chair that I found when I lived in Chinatown after this revelation about my father's death that my stepmother told me kind of in the midst of a fight. I was sort of going through this period of depression and anxiety. I was also going through a breakup at the time, and all of these griefs that I felt like I had been sort of running away from for many years kind of caught up with me. And I was sort of wandering around New York City, just trying to keep moving. And then I saw this blue chair, and it just called to me. For whatever reason, I felt like I really needed this chair. And so I dragged it home off the street into my room, and I sat in that blue chair for almost 7 days, trying to make sense of my life and allowing myself to feel the grief that I hadn't really allowed myself to feel over my mother leaving when I was really young, my father dying, and then a lot of the other sort of disasters that my family lived through. We lived in Ethiopia during a civil war, witnessed violence in Uganda when we lived there. And I was at the Twin Towers on 9/11. And so trying to sort of understand all of these broader forces that shaped my life, but then also even more historic forces, like on my mother's side, her family are genocide survivors of the Armenian genocide and actually came to America as refugees. And that was a history that I wasn't really deeply connected to because I didn't grow up with my mother. And so while in that chair, I was also doing research about the Armenian genocide, trying to understand the way that it shaped my mother's family and her family's choices, and the history of colonization in Ghana, where my father was from, and trying to connect to that history. So the blue chair was really a place of reckoning for me. It was both refuge and reckoning. I kind of had to escape my life for a while, but then I also wanted to very intentionally kind of make myself look at the difficult things that I had avoided for so long. And I don't know why I chose this blue chair, but it just seemed at the time like I really needed it, and yeah, so it played a really meaningful role. I think sometimes we just need an object or a place to kind of put grief or our emotions into, and that's what the blue chair was for me.
And when I was thinking about that, the blue chair, I think that, for a lot of people, that could be a physical thing or it could be a metaphorical thing. You can sort of think of probably any number of things in your own lives, what your blue chair might be if you need to sort of process events that are happening, to you and around you. I thought that was in your case, a very, very physical and real place, but also can be applied in other ways. So, and when I read the book and you sort of finished the last day in the blue chair, and you wrote some really moving chapters about sort of the conclusions you had come to, and especially I thought that last chapter called Home. And Ms. OWUSU sort of writes in the course of the final chapter the various ways that she has found home in her life, and I thought that's all those series of paragraphs that you start where you say, let me show you my home, and you describe a different home, and every one of them to me made sense. And it sort of reassured me in a lot of ways, in the ways that in the things we're experiencing, day in and day out, all of us in this pandemic and in anything else that's going on in our lives, that, we don't have to rely on any one thing to be comforting, that our homes can be any of many things. And so, you could probably sort of talk about that a bit better than I can.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, for much of my life, growing up the way that I did with kind of a nomadic childhood, we lived in Ethiopia and Tanzania and England and Italy and Uganda, and I moved to the United States at 18. And, my father being from Ghana, my mother being Armenian American, I have always had this sort of sense of longing to belong. And just as we were kind of settling into a home and learning the language and making friends, then I had to get ready to leave and say goodbye. And there were times when I felt like an outsider, even in my own families. I don't speak Tree, which is my father's language. And, because I'm Black, when I was visiting my mother's family in the States, some people assumed that I was adopted. And there was often this demand that was made of me to sort of choose or to see my identity as fixed. And so I grew up sometimes feeling this fear of rejection. And I think now more people understand race to be kind of a specious concept. And I think people are really expanding our understanding of what it is what our identities are and what it means to be from a place and connected to places. And so over the years, and in fact, through writing this book, was one of the biggest messages that I took from writing this book was that, I have come to define home and family really expansively, and to kind of claim all of the places and the people that I've lived among and loved and tried to belong to. I found that my love for them does make them mine in a way. It's always complicated. I don't belong anywhere necessarily in an uncomplicated way, but I've come to embrace those complications and to kind of celebrate the multiplicity of my identity.
Yeah, I was so admiring of the work, and I certainly appreciate your having the chance and the wherewithal to put it all down on paper to share with everyone, here in the room as well as out there in the world. I wish you well in selling the book as many and your message getting out to as many crossing people as you possibly can. And I think we all wish you well in going forward. So Dana, are there some folks here who have any questions, having listened to us chat a bit about the book, or anything else that we can follow up on?
I don't have any questions coming in yet from our audience, but everyone, if you want to send any questions on over, you can raise your hand like we had done earlier, or send them on in through the chat box. And Nadia, I just want to welcome you as well. Thank you for being with us tonight. This is just a fantastic treat and surprise to get to have you introduce your new book.
Yeah, I had the feeling that if I had a chance to talk to you for like an hour and a half, it would be a very quick hour and a half. I think you must be a very interesting person. So it's quite a life you've led, and I'm admiring of the way you have lived it so far. Congratulations.
So much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it and all the support.
Well, I guess one question I would say is for our audience, if they're walking away with your title Aftershocks, what is the biggest thing that they're really walking away with in their hands?
Yeah, so, I describe the book as a literary memoir with threads of cultural history to explore themes that we've kind of talked about, like the complexities of family, the meaning of home, the multiplicity of identity, and the ripple effects, both personal and generational, of trauma. And, I think that one of the biggest messages that I hope people can take away from the book, and that I, again, took away from writing the book, and that I think is really relevant in this moment. The book started as kind of a private project, a way for me to overcome the aches of isolation and dislocation and feeling somewhat disconnected from my family and, the places that I had called home, which I think are aches that in so many ways all of us are feeling right now. And I did begin from a place of grief, but I found that I was really writing toward love and connection, and even eventually toward reconciliation with my mother after a decade-long estrangement. And we now have a relationship that I'm very grateful for, and I think both of us have worked really hard to create through kind of openness and compassion and forgiveness. And I kind of discovered how actively people in my life work to love me across oceans and continents. And so it's just a reminder that that's possible, even in this time where we feel so separated and we're all in our kind of Zoom boxes in separate homes, that there are ways to kind of reach out across distance to connect, and that we can all choose with intention to do that for the people that we love, or even the people in our lives who are challenging. We can create new stories that open up different possibilities for us in the future.
That's such a beautiful thought, and I just couldn't agree more. After the year that we've all had, it's a very powerful message that I think we could all do well with sort of absorbing and taking in.
Thank you.
So Dana, thank you for having me as well, and having allowed me to present my titles. And again, thank you to Nadia, if I may call you that, for being here tonight. And I think Dana, we are good.
We are at that time. The hour just flew by. John, Nadia, thank you both again so much for being with us tonight. And to our guests, thank you so much for joining in on the conversation, for listening in, and as always, for supporting your local independent bookstores. We could not do what we do without you all. Remember, if you purchase 3 or more books on John's list before February 7th, 2021, you will receive a 15% off discount. And in addition, each title that you purchase will earn you a virtual ticket to our raffle. So happy reading all, and have a wonderful night.